I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Oscar-nominated production designer Guy Hendrix Dyas. Guy, first of all, you've done some exceptional work over the years, like Superman Returns and X2, X-Men United, Inception, Passengers. Spencer is, I would say a change of pace for you to some extent, and it's more contemporary in many ways. Can you talk us through the unique challenges of designing for a relatively contemporary setting, or at least a period that many of us remember, such as the early 1990s?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely had its own set of challenges. And I'll be the first person to tell you that any time you're dealing with these sort of historical pieces, as much goes into them as it does a sci-fi like Inceptional Passengers. I remember also designing, for example, Elizabeth the Golden Age with Kate Blanchett back in the day. Similar sort of thing, you're dealing with royalty. There's a great deal of research that goes into these films because there's always going to be someone out there who says, oh, they're using the wrong knife, or they're not eating the right food. So exceptional amount of research goes into this, absolutely everything. And we were lucky. We were working from an incredible script by Stephen Knight, who most of the people listening to this will know his work from Peaky Blinders and some of the other amazing films he's done. And I can tell you, Stephen's script was filled with these little Easter eggs and little details, which were absolutely superb to include in the film as part of the production design. And coupling that together with Pablo, dear friend of mine, incredible, talented director, who really knows how to, I suppose, get inside the head of a character and then make you feel as though you're going on this journey with this person. He's the master of that. He did it once with Jackie. We all saw that film. And now again with Spencer, an even higher level of sophistication. So really, when it comes to the design of a film like this, seemingly straightforward. Do you walk into a house and just shoot what's there? Well, no. Our palace is made up of about 8 different locations, including stage sets in Berlin, and that being the biggest point of all. We shot this film in Germany, not even the UK. Can you imagine the pressure?
Unbelievable. It looks so authentic to me. The Queen's ornate Jacobean estate at Sandringham obviously plays a very important role in the film. To me, it was almost like a character in the film itself, and it's the primary setting. Can you talk us through how you went about bringing that setting to life on screen?
Absolutely. Pablo talked about Diana, the people's princess. He talked about how she was very accessible, and yet she was in this world, and at a time, and you'll relate to this as well, at a time when the royals were still very closed in. She's really the reason that we now have more accessibility to the royals. They realized they had to modernize and update. So we're really visiting this family and this world in the last death throes, really, of that level of elitist secrecy. So creating the palace, as you say, as a character, it really made us think of ways in which we could enhance the way she was feeling through approaching this austere estate. What would that feel like for someone who could relate to everyday people and hadn't necessarily grown up in quite that level of opulence? And so, Pablo and I'd be traveling around Germany. We'd be talking about, the excitement of Johnny Greenwood's music and what that was going to bring to the story, and also how visually we could create that feeling of isolation and a kind of an opulence and beauty with a thinly veiled level of, quite frankly, just not feeling great about where you were. Films started coming to mind, references. I know it's referenced a lot in a lot of the reviews that, we're looking at the Overlook Hotel again, which is an old favorite of mine. But also on top of that, to be perfectly honest with you, and perhaps more than the Overlook, we were looking at, Xanadu in Citizen Kane, and the way that in that film, Orson Welles and his crew had created on a budget, on a very tight budget, a space that felt huge, enormous, and had these sort of sparsely dressed pieces of furniture, dramatic lighting, and the effect that that has on you as an audience, going back and looking at an old film like that, and understanding that the artistry in that was really creating, I suppose, vastness by dressing the sets and choosing the locations in a way that really made you feel small and diminutive and not very important. And that all played hopefully into what you see in the film.
That is so fascinating because, like, to the untrained eye, you know, the film's very austere, it's dreamlike. It has this aesthetic that's quite dreamlike, contemplative, uneasy, and there's this sense of dread as Diana's loneliness and despair lead her to feel suffocated. And it's the hope of Kristen Stewart's performance is so vital to that feeling. But the walls of this grand estate, I felt like they were closing in on her. And I'm just wondering how much of that quality informed how you approached the look and feel, particularly in the first half of the film.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. I really got to play with things that to the audience on a first look may not appear to be particularly special, but they were to me because they were kind of discoveries. And, you know, I've got a 15, 20-year career as a production designer, and I was forced to look a little deeper to push for these emotions that Pablo wanted. And I couldn't hide behind big spaceships or rotating corridors or all that stuff that I'd done before. I had to go into this deep classic production design stylization to find those moments. Let me give you a couple of examples. What I learned in this film was that to create a sense of an empty room, you don't give a director an empty room. You give them an empty room with maybe one or two pieces of furniture in it, and that's when your eye says something's wrong here. Where's all the other furniture? You don't think about it when the room is actually empty. You think about it when there are a few pieces awkwardly placed. And I did a lot of that on purpose. The scene where Diana has the big confrontation with Charles, you'll notice that enormous snooker table that's red in between them. What the hell's that doing there? Well, any British person will tell you, you never have a red snooker table. That is a no-no in the world of snooker. But Pablo and I took that creative risk because we wanted to create something that visually helped create a distance between this young woman and her estranged husband. And we felt that that snooker table in that deep wine color would produce that effect. Same with the famous meal where, you know, I don't know if I can talk about it. Some stuff happens with a necklace but we played with color again in that set. It's no accident that Kristen's green silk dress is very close to the color of the nettle soup, which in turn is very close to the color of the silk wallpaper on the walls. Why use green? It is something you're supposed to never put around. They say, ask any photographer, never use green. Well, we went all the way with green and red as a color scheme for a Christmas dinner, which seems insane, but actually the effect that we got was absolutely terrific. And of course, Claire, our wonderful DP, was part of this as well. She weighed in on things like, for example, the color of the tablecloth, which you'll notice is a very deep red in that dinner scene. That was so that we could really effectively control the balance of light and the glow on the actors' faces so that you really got that almost, I want to say, Barry Lyndon quality of candlelight that you see in the film that's so hard to come by, you know.
Yeah, that scene at the dinner table, the dining table, it felt to me like a psychological thriller. It was suffocating. And I've said this to Pablo Larraín, the director. I felt suffocated, not only because of Johnny Greenwood's music, which was getting louder and louder, and not only because the royal family that we were kept at a distance from were glaring at her as they all robotically ate that soup, but the way that it was shot and the way that you designed the table with that color scheme made me feel almost nauseous. And I know that's all intentional. And that is the key to production design. It's not just you throwing something together and people just get on with shooting it. It's so intentional, isn't it?
It is intentional. I'd never been more involved in food, to be honest, as a production designer. And as anyone who watches this film will see, we went all out with the food. Literally, I have never spent more time, more effort, and more of my department's funding on experimentation with food. I'm used to scenically playing with walls and doors and the age of buildings, not playing with glazes and little finishes to food that give it just that extra tantalizing look that make you want to just chow down and eat all this stuff. And it was important because she's dealing with bulimia. We needed to make the food even more enticing than perhaps you'd normally expect to see in a film. That soup, for example, that was soup number 14. And it took us that many experiments to get to the right viscosity of the soup so it fell in the right way back into the bowl as she's struggling to eat that necklace, which, by the way, is carefully crafted from chocolate and a candy glaze that looks like pearls. Literally, when we held our chocolate edible necklace next to the real thing, you could not tell the difference. It was extraordinary. We had the most amazing food stylists on this film.
That's amazing. See, it's that kind of stuff that maybe goes over some of the audience's head because we're just so invested. We think she's eating pearls.
Right.
You know how art is quite subjective, right? Obviously. And when I was viewing this film through my own personal lens, it confirmed my unease with the monarchy as an institution, and particularly the complex, oppressive machinery that surrounds them. And that's just from my view. But I think Pablo maybe intended some of that outcome or reaction with the audience. You know, throughout the film, we see signs saying, be careful, they can hear everything. And downstairs or wherever it is where the cooks are working, the lighting is completely different. It's a bit more sparse. Can you talk us through what you were trying to achieve there with our unease for this royal family that we're kept at a distance from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we were playing with the class system here a little bit. And although that class system in England, which is it's famous for, has faded over the years, we still wanted to emphasize that very strange relationship where you have a working class below the royal family, so to speak, who still adore them and would do anything for them. It's a very strange sort of psychological condition that might be, unfortunately, very uniquely British. But we used all sorts of strange locations. Again, those corridors you talk about, and thank you for noticing them, I stripped them down so they look very normal, so that the audience would look and say, well, this doesn't feel like the palace. And then all those subterranean spaces. You know, the kitchen, for example, was actually a kitchen for concessions in a soccer stadium in the middle of Berlin, because it was big enough and allowed us the space we needed so that Pablo could treat the food preparation scenes almost like a ballet, a military dance, he called it. You'll see the food and the soup being prepared, very specific motion as the soldiers carry the food in. All of that was designed to feel like a finely tuned and finely oiled machine. And we needed the space in the kitchen to pull that off, which we couldn't get at any stately home. So we had to think outside the box. And a lot of those corridors and the staff room, that was all found at a winery that we went into and stripped down and dressed as the staff room. As I say, this was a very strangely complex jigsaw puzzle and maze of different places that, thank goodness, our editor was able to seamlessly weave together to make you feel it's one very strange character.
Yeah, and we're fortunate to be able to speak to you about this because a lot of it goes unnoticed because we're so invested and we really believe what we're seeing. You know how the film changes its tone somewhat as Diana eventually starts to become, or she seems at peace with her decision to escape the family. The tone shifts in a way. She's more carefree. And I just wonder, what changes did you make to the production design in terms of color palette, light shifts, and other things to contribute to that tonal shift?
Well, you're definitely, that's brilliant you noticed that. It's brilliant that you even noticed that I made those choices. You know, when you're making an animation film, you'll know this. The animators put together a thumbnail of the entire film with color images to show you what that color story is within an animation film. We did something very similar, Yeshim, my set decorator, and I, where we carefully mapped out how these color schemes would work, climaxing, of course, in the worst way with the Christmas dinner and that use of green and deep maroon together, which really don't go very well. A second peak, of course, is Charles's library, very cold browns and blue colors with that bright red table in the center. But you're right, as she becomes freer, as she becomes more stable, we suddenly move away from that harrowing bathroom scene where I've mixed lime green and turquoise blue together, and we get that sense of the caged bird in the shower, that 1930s shower, which was a metaphor for the caged bird. We move all that away and we start to come out to the light. She's there with Maggie on the beaches of Norfolk. We see the blowing grass in that natural sunlight. You know, we see that there's less color control as we move on. And by the time they go to the fast food restaurant, it just should feel like a normal world. That was certainly the idea behind the production design.
Yeah, it had to. I mean, I could just, the fact that I was feeling so different, and it wasn't just because of Kristen's performance. There was so much going on in terms of the look and feel and the sound that it really was quite effective. I have a final question, and it's not really Spencer related. It's more just about your career at large. I get really excited when at the Oscars, movies are nominated in production design that are not necessarily just big period pieces. Contemporary work like Spencer, and of course, sci-fi and fantasy work, which I really adore. Inception, I thought was really expected. That was, I mean, phenomenal. What's one of my favorite films of all time, was my #1 film of 2010. But when you were nominated for Passengers, that to me came out of the blue in a good way. It was where your peers in that branch really stood up and took notice of something so innovative. Can you talk us through your thoughts and your feelings when you were nominated both times, but particularly for Passengers?
I'll tell you a little secret. When we were there for Inception, you know, everyone was there. Wally Pfister, the DP, of course, Chris, everyone was there. It was my first time being nominated. I felt extremely honored, and everyone told me we were expected to win. As the newcomer, my wife and I were just there to have a good time. And, you know, your heart drops a little bit when you don't win, but you've been nominated, for heaven's sake. How often does that happen, you know, to someone like me, you know, a farm boy from the south of England? So I was just very happy. Passengers was even more of a crazy surprise. It was not really an awards movie. In my opinion, I knew we'd done something special, my team and I, with the design, but I always feel that we do something special. But for some reason, it captured everyone's imagination. I think also that ship was very much a character. It was sort of Robinson Crusoe in space. So the ship became a character. And I was particularly proud because I had actually designed the ship myself. But, you know, so many art departments that we have with the scale of the film, the designers don't always design what you see because they're busy with other things. I have a background as an industrial designer and a concept designer, so I tend to do a lot of my design and artwork myself and then pass those illustrations to my team of very talented illustrators and concept artists who just improve, quite frankly, on what I've done. So I think that's partly why Passengers got a look in there. But again, my wife and I just turned up. We said, hey, we're not going to win. Let's just have a great time. You know, it's exactly what we did. Let's not forget that was the year where they got the Best Picture announcement wrong. So if there was going to be a year to be there to have fun, that was the year. Trust me. So, so there we go.
what a great memory to be in that room when Warren Beatty made that
Oh my God.
unfortunate error.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, actually.
I can imagine. Well, Guy, I hope to see you at the Oscars soon, perhaps for Spencer, Oscar nomination number 3. In any event, congratulations on some great work and thank you for your time today.
I appreciate it. Lovely to meet you. Take care. Cheers. Bye.